It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice right here, right now. My name is Michael Evans, and I will be your host this morning. Thank gosh it's Friday. Well, we've got some controversy out there this morning on the new Al, not Cliven, Bundy. We're going to talk about that because it is all the news that is out there right now. The Republicans and the conservative folks that were supporting Bundy are running away from him at an alarming and stunning rate. I believe that if most people were to actually hear his comments in full, they would recognize that there is a context associated with them that has not been given to you, and that the Media Matters organization and of course the Ministry of Propaganda, and I include Fox News in that, you know, they ran with the with the documentation that was supported or provided by Media Matters versus the actual full comments. Now, I am not going to support and encourage and or exonerate Cliven, henceforth known as Al Bundy, because he was inarticulate. And here's my problem with what Cliven did. It's not the fact that he's got. It's not the fact that he made some statements that were taken out of context. It's not the fact that he's not a polished speaker. What bothers me about what Cliven Bundy has done is that he was more interested in making sure that he was the center of attention here than he was in making sure that the issue was the center of attention. See, I don't care what the guy thinks on a personal level. We have this thing called free speech. And I'm not even sure, after I've heard and I've listened to the unedited comments, and I'm going to play them for you in just a moment, because we have this thing called free speech. And his words were clearly inarticulate. And they have set the clock back on this entire issue significantly. Only in public perception, but it matters. And words matter. If they didn't matter, then you have to question yourself about your reaction to Hillary's words when she was talking about Benghazi. It does matter. The problem here is that the standoff has never been about Bundy. But you see, he's opened his mouth and he spewed some verbal diarrhea, and he gave the left and the enemy all the fodder that they need to make the issue about him and not about federal abuse of power and authority. The issue is the moral high ground. And Cliven, who was not the main character, has now made himself the main character and single-handedly given up our moral high ground. And quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pissed. I'll tell you why I am. Because, you see, Cliven had an opportunity here to do something good with what's transpired. But in order to accomplish that, somebody had to inform him, and he had to be cognizant of the fact that he's not an articulate speaker, that he's not capable of being able to express verbally and articulately what he thinks. And, you know, not understanding, because he doesn't have experience in how the media can take your words and bend them and twist them, he got caught. He got caught in a game bigger than himself. The problem is that Cliven like all human beings, allowed the power of his position to get in the way of what was right. Instead of playing the quiet, silent man, he wanted to keep this momentum moving. He was getting a little drunk on the Kool-Aid. And I don't mean that about his comment. I mean about his whole persona here. That was a mistake. And we should recognize it, acknowledge it, and admit it when it's true. That's called critical thinking. The truth of the matter is, there was absolutely no reason for Cliven to hold a daily press conference in front of 1 or 2 or 3 media people. And frankly, some of the folks there should have been cognizant enough to say, Cliven, this is probably not a good idea, because all it's going to take is one misstep in a room full of landmines, and you can set back the movement by a half a dozen years. We're going to play the actual clip. I want you to hear it in its entirety. And I want you to understand, towards the end, the part that they cut out was how he's talking about Mexican immigrants who come over the border. And, of course, being right in Nevada, he's got an enormous influence of immigrants that come over the border, probably both legal and illegal. And he talks about how their families are far tighter knit than our families, that they work harder than we do. And if you don't like that, then again, I challenge you to think critically and be willing to admit sometimes that we can be wrong. And in this case, I agree with him. Our family units are falling apart. Everybody's worried about running around and getting high in Colorado and Washington instead of buckling down and fixing the country. Everybody's trying to run around figuring out, what can I get for free? All right, our second, third, and fourth topics are going to be Hillary regrets Benghazi, right on cue for 2016. I'm sorry, I had to launch into that one early this morning because this one's bothering me. Our third segment, John Boehner hypocritically mocks patriots about immigration. Really? I've got a personal message for John. And our fourth topic, Eric Holder must be dishonorably discharged. All right, let's jump into this because we've got a few minutes, and I want you to hear 2 different clips I'm going to play you. One is Cliven Bundy, and this is the unedited version of what he had to say. And they clipped out the beginning and they clipped out the end. And I want you to hear, and it's very difficult to hear because it was recorded, with a pretty, it was recorded in the field. And, he's standing here underneath a tree, and it wasn't, he didn't have a microphone in his face because, well, of course, the mainstream Ministry of Propaganda has all split now, right? So it's all alternative media folks. And, most of us are lucky if we can scrape together enough pennies to get out there or to, buy a spare battery, not be able to drive out there in a satellite-fed truck that cost $1.6 million, right? But of course, I don't even want to get into it. I'm so disgusted. 6 companies run everything you see and hear and think, and all of them jumped on the bandwagon here, took this edited piece and ran with it, and they had an obligation to do better by you, and they didn't. I expect that of MSLSD. I don't expect that of fake news. I mean Fox News. I mean faux news, the controlled opposition. I don't expect that of Communist News Network, right? They're supposed to be, they hold themselves up as the one that you can trust. The truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, you can't trust anything you hear from anyone. Don't even take what I say as factual. Do your own due diligence. Do your own homework. Make sure that you formulate your own opinion based on all of the available information, not just what I say. Don't parrot my opinion. I don't parrot anyone else's. I formulate my own. I read probably a couple of 100 pages a day to make sure that I'm not just grabbing and grasping at someone else's opinion and then parroting it off like a little parrot on my shoulder. If that's what you're going to do, then you're going to fall into a trap as well. All right, let's listen to the actual unedited version of Cliven Bundy. And I apologize for the quality of this, but it's pretty rough. Just stick with me for a second here.
And so what I'm testifying to you, I was in the Watts riot. I seen the beginning fire, and I seen that last fire. What I seen is civil disturbance. People are not happy. People are thinking they don't have their freedoms and don't have these things, and they didn't have them. We've progressed quite a bit from that day until now, and we sure don't want to go back.
Now, you'll notice here he's talking about the Watts riots, and he's saying essentially that he witnessed the Watts riots, and that the people involved in the Watts riots were unhappy and upset about being disenfranchised from society, not just, one issue or another, in general. And his point was that they don't look happy. They're very unhappy about everything, and we don't want to go back to what it was before.
We sure don't want these colored people to have to go back to that point. We sure don't want these Mexican people to go back to that point. And
what he said there was, we don't want the colored people to go back to that point, and we don't want the Mexican people to go back to that point. He's talking about pre-Watts, and his general context here is that government has created a level of dependency that has enslaved the black population in the country and the Hispanic population in the country. And I'll grant you, he's not articulate enough to use the right words, the PC word. He's not articulate enough to say African American. I'm not going to use that word either. It's too PC. You're black. Big deal. I'm white. I don't call myself a, German Irish American.
we can make a difference right now by taking care of some of these bureaucracies and do it in a peaceful way. Let me talk to you about the Mexicans. These are just things I know about the Negro. I want to tell you one more thing I know about the Negro. When I go through Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, and I would see these little government houses, and in front of that government house, the door was usually open, and the older people and the kids, and there's always at least a half a dozen people sitting on the porch. They didn't have nothing to do. They didn't have nothing for their kids to do. They didn't have nothing for their young girls to do. And because they were basically on government subsidy, and so now what do? They abort their young children. They put their young men in jail because they never learned how to pick cotton. And I've often wondered, are they better off as slaves picking cotton, having family life and doing things, or are they better off under government subsidy?
They just transfer them to that.
Yeah, they didn't get no more freedom. They got less freedom. They had less family alive, and their happiness, you can see in their faces, they weren't happy sitting on that concrete sidewalk. Down there, they were probably growing their turnips. So that's all government. That's not freedom. Now let me talk about the Spanish people. You know, I understand that they come over here against our Constitution and cross our borders. But they're here, and they're people. And I've worked side by side a lot of them. Don't tell me they don't work, and don't tell me they don't pay taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And don't tell me they don't have better family structures than most of us white people. When you see those Mexican families, they're together, they're picnic together, they're spending their time together, and I'll tell you, in my way of thinking, they're awful nice people. And we need to have those people join us and be with us, not come to our party.
Now watch the edit.
Sorry. Okay, so the edited version is what comes next, and they cut out the entire aspect of the Hispanic piece, and they cut out the first few seconds of the statement about the Watts riots and all those kinds of things. The point here is that, one, the media, the Ministry of Propaganda, the left wing, and that includes the controlled opposition of fake news, faux news, Fox News, all of them jumped on the bandwagon and utilized the edited variations or edited versions of this. And the truth is, they're all in such a hurry to be PC and politically correct and not lose, some viewership over it, that they were willing to demonize and follow along with what was taken out of context. I got to tell you, that's disingenuous to say the least, and it's unethical and immoral itself. I'm not suggesting that Cliven is not it may or may not be, and I don't know. I don't know the man personally. But I can tell you this. This isn't about Clive Bundy. This is not about him, and it's not about Eamon, his son, and it's not about his family. What it is about is one more victim out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of victims of federal government overreach. Not just individuals, but states and towns and counties. And, words and context matter. They truly do. If they don't, then I challenge you and I throw out in front of you, well, what do you say about what Hillary said when she was testifying before Congress and said, what difference does it make? It makes a lot of difference. The truth is, I can only wish that someone from the alternative media who is skilled as a PR person had gone out there and helped the Bundy family in this regard. It would have done us all a world of good. Now we have to combat a left-wing media that was just waiting for some fodder. Cliven, he's just a farmer, just a rancher. That's all he is. He's never probably spoken in public other than maybe at his church. And this is probably the biggest event in his life. Unfortunately, he lost perspective because it's not what he said. It's that he allowed the situation and the moment to become paramount, what was more important than the issues surrounding it. He allowed himself to become the story, and that's never good. Now we're going to have to fix it. And we've been set back. The problem is, and I heard David Webb speak on it last night on Hannity. Hannity, rejected it, and I unequivocally, in no way, blah, 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 blah. Greta, same thing. I didn't see O'Reilly, and I didn't see Megyn Kelly. I was at a property rights council meeting doing what I should have been doing. And what all of us should be doing, fighting back. All right, I'm going to play you one other segment here before the end of the time. This is about a 3-minute segment. This is one of the individuals who's doing security at the ranch. He and a group of individuals from Missouri, my home state, went out there. And he's a black man. And here is his take, or if you will, response. This is on Pete Santilli's show, and Pete's still out there. Pete's not the most articulate guy in the world either. His heart's in the right place. He does the right things, but he's not the most articulate guy in the world either. And, frankly, somebody from the PR community should have gone out there and helped him. Hang on a second. Listen to this.
Okay, here we go. All right, sir, here we are at Bundy Ranch. And you know what, state your first name or however you want to be called?
D.
You're D. Okay. As you know, as I just described to you, the liberal media, because the federal government lost because they couldn't use guns against the American people. So now they're using the media propaganda, and they're trying to paint Cliven Bundy based on comments he made, as well as all of us out here, as racist. Now, I didn't tell you what to say. I want you to speak very honestly to this yourself.
Right. I'm familiar with the comments that I've read from Mr. Bundy, supposedly. The way I see it, the bigger picture is much more important. This is about sovereignty. It's about the rights of the American people, and it's kind of divisive to take Mr. Bundy's words, whether he said them or not, and try and misconstrue this whole movement. From the way I see it, it's much bigger than that. And if we get hung up on something so minuscule, which is used to intentionally divide us, then we're never gonna be able to come together.
Do you believe what we're doing on behalf of, even if if African Americans were offended by any commentary? I could make comments to offend people. Do you believe that what we're doing here is for all of their benefit, whether they know it or not?
I believe it's all inclusive. Like I said, it's much bigger than one person. It's bigger than Bundy, bigger than the cattle, and that's why I'm here. Came from Missouri with a team of guys because we felt compelled to do so, and it's something that I believe in. I believe it is colorless, and I'm actually just happy to be here.
All right. There's a guy who looks at it in the right perspective. Articulate, well-spoken, clearly stated his position, and understands the issues at hand. He's not looking for the limelight. And quite frankly, that's what bothered me about Cliven Bundy's statement. It's unnecessary for him to give a daily press announcement and press statement. And frankly, that's the part that bothers me the most. One, it was taken out of context. And that's not Cliven Bundy's problem. That's the mainstream media's problem. But Cliven gave them all the ammunition they needed, and that was a problem. All right, we're going to wrap because this is the end of our segment. When we come back, we're going to talk about Hillary and how she regrets Benghazi. Right on cue for 2016's upcoming election. Isn't that amazing? You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. We'll be back in just a moment. Please ride with us this morning. I think these are important topics we're going to hit on this issue with Hillary. Then next we're going to talk about John Boehner and how he hypocritically mocks patriots on immigration. Unbelievable. I got a personal message for John. And then fourth, Eric Holder, who must be dishonorably discharged. Stick with us. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now.